Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight for this. Sorry. Thank you for being here tonight for this important conversation about combating anti-Semitism in our community. My name is Rachel Bender. I'm the executive director at Lenox Hill Neighborhood House. Lenox Hill Neighborhood House is a 131-year-old settlement house. Sorry about that. Lenox Hill Neighborhood House is a 131-year-old settlement house dedicated to serving the community and improving the lives of over 17,000 New Yorkers in need each year. We gather as a community at a time when hate incidents are on the rise and when too many of our neighbors, our friends, colleagues, and fellow community members are facing threats, harassment, and violence simply because of who they are. This is not just a Jewish issue, this is a community issue that affects all of us. We are fortunate to have strong leadership on this issue. Our local assembly member, Rebecca Seawright, has been a tireless advocate for civil rights and community safety, working both locally and in the state capital to advance legislation and resources that protect all of our residents from hate and discrimination. Assembly member Seawright has been a steadfast ally of the Jewish community, offering landmark legislation requiring individuals convicted of hate crime to undergo tolerance and diversity training. She's secured state funding for synagogues, Jewish nonprofits, and Holocaust education programs, and has led as the lead sponsor of the New York State Equal Rights Amendment, ratified in 2024. She continues advancing protections against discrimination for all New Yorkers. We are very pleased to be hosting tonight's important town hall for action and partnering with Assembly Member Seawright's office to serve our community. Please join me in welcoming Assembly Member Seawright.
Let's give another big round of applause to Rachel Bender and Mark and all the staff here. This evening, and thank goodness the air conditioner is working great. I want to thank all of you for attending this very important forum this evening. Special thanks to Jim.
Can't hear you.
Let's see if we can get the microphone. Can you hear me now? A special thanks to Jim Lee, Program and Operations Manager, for coordinating with our team, my Chief of Staff, Fortune Barrissey, Arlie, Bryn, Evan, our fabulous Simon Wiesenthal intern, who you're going to be hearing from later tonight, Julia, right here on the camera, and Kevin and all of our staff volunteers that have worked so hard on this forum this evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight for this very, very important town hall. Our distinguished panel members who you'll be hearing from shortly, we come together as neighbors, advocates, and allies to confront hate, foster understanding, and strengthen the bonds that unite our community. Before we begin, let's take a moment of silence to honor the victims of the tragic shooting in Midtown yesterday. Thank you. Our thoughts and deepest sympathies are with their families, friends, and all those affected by this senseless act of violence. I'd like to now invite up Rabbi Michael Miller to lead us in an opening prayer, reminding us of the values of unity, resilience, and compassion that guide us in moments like these.
Thank you, Assembly. Lord of the universe, our lives in this great city were disrupted yesterday by acts of terror-filled violence that defied civilized norms. 4 innocent people were murdered, including a uniformed New York Police Department officer, with no rational rhyme or reason. Weapons of war, assault rifles, not in the hands of law enforcement, have no place on city streets. Antisemitism and prejudice, bias, and hate of any sort have no sanctuary anywhere in this metropolis, in this state, or in this country. We grieve and mourn for the losses suffered by the families of the victims. We embrace them as family, as any one of them could have been one of us. Lord, shower your blessings on them, provide them with comfort and consolation during the difficult days, weeks, months, and years ahead. In the Psalms we read, Yehi shalom b'chelech, shalva b'amonotayich. May there be peace within your walls, serenity within your dwelling places. As we pray for peace in America, around the world, and especially in the Middle East, here at home, Lord, watch over the men and women in blue and in all of the uniformed services, all heroes who, at the risk of their own lives, watch over us to ensure our safety. Grant strength and wisdom to our elected officials to enact laws that provide for our welfare. Again from Psalms, Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha. May God protect us from every evil. May He guard our soul. Adonai yishmor tzeitcha uvolecha me'atav yad olam. May the Lord guard our departures and our arrivals from this time forth and forever. Amen.
Thank you for that beautiful prayer, Rabbi. Thank you all again for joining us. We have many distinguished guests and community leaders and partners here this evening standing with us tonight. I'd like to give a few shout outs. On Zoom, we have the former JCC president, Sheila Lambert, LGBT activist and leader, Judith Hazen-Windsor, David Hochberg. In the audience, we have Patty Kinner, who serves on 8 Jewish boards and supported us this evening. We also have Cheryl Fishbein, the JCC chair, Dr. Barbara Rosen, a leader and educator, Adele Fuchsberg, Community Board 8 members. Raise your hand if you're in the audience. Sherry Meaner, Danielle Abzar, Barbara Butter, John McClement, on Zoom, Brad Hershenson, Upper East Side Roosevelt Island District Leader Ben Axelrod, and many, many others here this evening. Anti-Semitism is not a distant problem. It is here. It is in our neighborhoods, in our schools, and in our city. In 2024 alone, the NYPD reported 345 anti-Semitic hate crimes in New York City, more than half of all hate crimes in the 5 boroughs. Across the state, nearly 50% of the hate crimes target Jewish New Yorkers. But these are not just statistics. They represent families afraid to walk to synagogue, children bullied for wearing a Star of David, and entire communities living in fear. I know this fight personally after hosting the same forum on anti-Semitism. A few years ago, my district office and campaign office were stalked and defaced with anti-Semitic graffiti. White paint was splashed across our windows and doors. A vile, hateful note was slid under our door. It was a stark reminder that hate festers when we do not confront it directly. Since then, I've taken the fight to Albany, proudly sponsored and passed 2 pieces of legislation updating our hate crime statute, requiring anyone convicted of a hate crime to undergo mandatory counseling and education, and to change the presumptive evidence statute. Education is our strongest defense against hate. I was proud to secure $1.5 million in state funding to bring the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Mobile Museum of Tolerance to New York, a state-of-the-art interactive exhibit that will bring powerful lessons on tolerance and human rights to schools, houses of worship, law enforcement, and communities across the state. We've strengthened our laws, expanded hate crime prevention units, increased NYPD training, and we're very pleased tonight to have a panel member from the NYPD Hate Crimes Unit and from Commissioner Tish's office. If you'll raise your hand in the room, we appreciate your being here this evening. We've invested millions in security for synagogues, schools, and community centers. The city of New York has established a mayor's office to combat anti-Semitism. These are critical steps, but policies alone cannot end hate. We also have from the governor's office a representative, Jordan Feiner. If you'll raise your hand in the back of the room, thank you for being here. The community liaison to the New York City Council Speaker, Adrian Adams, Passaic Osina. Thank you for being here. Tyler Rivera, Community Board 8, and a longtime activist. And let's see, we have Susie Jaffe. Thank you for being here. And I know that you've led several Jewish organizations and been former deputy state for New York State. So I appreciate your being here, and Sherry Miller as well. Combating anti-Semitism means teaching the truth of history, standing up to hate speech, and building bridges of understanding across all of our communities. It means never staying silent in the face of bigotry. To my Jewish family, friends, neighbors, and constituents, you are not alone. We stand together, and we prove that hate has no home here, not in our schools, not in our streets, and not anywhere in New York. I'm now very pleased to introduce our moderator, someone very special to me that will serve this evening as our moderator, keeping us all on time. My spouse, Jay Hershenson, he's a vice president at Queens College and has served on the board, or is serving on the board of the Jewish Community Relations Council and a former board member of ABL. So Jay, I now turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we give a round of applause to Assembly Member Seawright and her dedicated public staff? Today's conversation is urgent and necessary. We're here to discuss the rise of anti-Semitism in our city and state, and to learn what we can do on that together. Just a few words of context. The virus of anti-Semitism goes back over 2,000 years. The earliest evidence was in ancient Egypt, where the Egyptian priest Nephthah included in his writings a portrayal of Jews negatively as part of, quote, anti-foreign sentiment. So that's over 2,000 years. That's before BCE. In New York, I tried to go back to find out the earliest evidence of anti-Semitism. And in the days of the New Netherlands, when Peter Stuyvesant was the governor, he tried to ban Jewish refugees who were fleeing the Brazilian Inquisition. He was overruled by the Dutch West India Company, because fortunately there were Jewish supporters within the Dutch West India Company, and so therefore they combated anti-Semitism in 1654. So there's a long, long history of combating anti-Semitism, which lets us know that the virus was ancient, the epidemic is today, and the antidote will be the subject of tonight's panel. I just want to spend a moment to thank this remarkable panel of experts and say a couple of words about each, because they are extremely distinguished. But before I do that, I want to mention what I would call the rules of engagement. Each panelist will have 3 minutes for responses to questions that have combined what has been made available from the community online prior to this event, and the help of Assembly Member Seawright's very dedicated staff. 3 minutes for each response. So the timekeeper in the front row. The timekeeper is Rhea. Where is Rhea? There we go. Get her hand. So we can keep him latched on Rhea, who's a dedicated intern.
And, she'll let us know when 1 minute remains, and another student when time is up. That's how we keep the flow going. However, even though each member of the panel will answer one question, we will allow 1 or 2 members of the panel, if they want to weigh in with response to what is said. This way, we'll be able to have that kind of discussion. While this town hall is taking place, if you have any questions that you do want to submit for consideration, there'll be note cards that will be passed around, and of course online you can use the chat. And it's important here. Can any of the interns raise their hand in terms of who's available to pick up the note cards? Here we go. Thank you very much. So they're on the side of the room, and we will do that. And that will occur during the Q&A portion of the absolute participation in that particular format. Finally, we will end with a call to action, and I'll indicate the conclusion of our introduction. The panelists will be doing this call to action. So it's really great. We have a tremendously prominent panel here. We have Sandy Steichen, who is a motivational speaker who is heard all over the world. He is a Holocaust survivor, former member of the Israeli Air Force, and he'll be sharing his story about the horrors of hate at the bounty. We're very blessed to have him here. Thank you. You can applaud us. We're going to have Deborah Kafka, who is the Senior Associate Regional Director of APL in New York and New Jersey, overseeing efforts to combat anti-Semitism and secure Jewish communities. I think everyone here in this room knows of the great work of APL nationwide. So let's give Deborah a round of applause. Julia Lahu, who is the Government Advocacy Intern with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, representing a new generation of advocates committed to fighting anti-Semitism. He has worked unbelievably hard together with the interns in the office to put this together. So let's give Julia a special round of applause. My family is here as a chairman section. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Ella Schneider, who is the Tri-State Campus Regional Manager at Stand With Us, which is focused on empowering and educating the next generation against anti-Semitism. They too have done incredible work on campuses all across this country. Let's give Ella a round of applause. Logan Pilster, the Associate Director of the American Jewish Committee of New York, and he has been working to strengthen interfaith and international partnerships. I have the honor to work closely with Rob Solnick and Marissa, Eric, and all I can say is that AJC does fabulous work. Thank you, Brent. Give him a round of applause. There is a book by Andre Park called The Last of the Just. And that is the story of 36 just men. And men should be men, but 36 just men who are on the earth at any point in time rise to defend their communities and do a dangerous work. I say that by way of introduction because Rabbi Michael Miller completed 36 years as the CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council. He is here with us tonight. Let's give Rabbi Miller a special mention. You all are just men. And finally, we have two more. Matthew I. Crompton. Oh, actually, is Mr. Mark? Oh, great. Okay. Mr. Marcus is here, and he is representing the hate crimes task force. He's the head of the task force. I had someone else down, you know, the top of the meeting here, but fortunately, you showed up tonight, and he is doing amazing work against hate crime. And you are an inspector. That's fantastic. Thank you for being here. He deserves a double round of applause for the organization. Finally, my good friend will be doing closing remarks. He is the executive VP of the Auschwitz Jewish Center Foundation. Of course, I've worked with him for many years with a tremendous leader in the New York State Senate, doing great work, and of course, the Simon Wiesenthal Foundation, and that's Michael Collins. So, the first question, and we start with the veteran of the Israeli Air Force and Holocaust survivor. We'd like to know from you your perspective regarding anti-Semitism, what can be done going forward as you compare to what you have lived through and your amazing life. And also, is there anything we can do to encourage institutions to adopt or use the international definition of anti-Semitism? Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I am very honored to be here, and before I start anything, I want to say thank you to Julia because she made sure that I am part of that. Let me start first with IHRA. And this is something that has to be adopted not only in every state in the United States, but all over the world, because you cannot solve the problem, in my opinion, unless you know what it is. And a lot of people, okay, although it's not binding, IHRA, okay, explains what anti-Semitism is. And to combat it, we must have it all over the every country must adopt it. As a Israel, what happened in October 7th, I was completely shocked with the brutality of Hamas. The war in Gaza is not against the civilians, it is against a brutal, okay, a group of terrorists. Now, what happened is, I am, as a Holocaust survivor, I was very surprised. And I did not think that I will live to see the day, what's happening today, not only in the United States, but worldwide. During the October 7, I went through the gamut of emotions. And a lot of people try to compare it to the Holocaust. Do me a favor. Please don't. Holocaust is a unique moment in history, will never repeat itself. Okay? And there is absolutely no comparison whatsoever. However, okay, even the Nazis were not as brutal. In some of the most prestigious campuses in this country, and I'm talking right now as a Holocaust survivor, as an American, some of the brightest young people that we have, future leaders of this country and the world, when they will graduate, they will become educated idiots. Into Iran, they are useful idiots. And I also want to say that for me, my life is to educate the next generation. And we have to start with them when they are very young, because once they are indoctrinated, it's almost impossible to change them and to start thinking critically. Now, there is a virus that can never be eradicated. You probably never heard it, so you will hear it now. Bullying, bigotry, Jew hatred, hate, racism, ideology. It always was there, it always will be there, depending on the type of technology that we have, whatever they teach, the activity, and everything else. In my personal opinion, the most important thing what we can do, okay, is education. And this must be done starting at very, very young age. I start to speak, with fourth graders. I even spoke to second graders, and believe me, okay, it's not what you say, it's how you say. And one of the greatest experiences that I ever had was with the second graders. And later on, if you want, I will tell you, but it's absolutely amazing. We should not underestimate the intelligence of the young people. And so it's important, not what you say, how you say it, and what you say. For me, okay, the young generation, education is so important that 5 years ago in an audio app, I answered questions for 16 hours straight. And people ask me, how could you do that? And because that is my passion. And we have here very young people, people that will go to college, and have new professions. And I suggested to them to choose, okay, a profession that they can be passionate about it, because they will never work a single day of their life. Well, work will be pleasure, pleasure will be work. But before I finish, and I will tell you, and I urge all of us, all of you, and each one of you has a very strong voice. Do not be afraid to talk. Okay? Okay, silence is death. And I want to give you just an example of what it means, okay? By talking and not being afraid. As you probably all of you know, okay, the Nazis, okay, did mental experiments and murdered mentally and physically ill. Okay? A priest found out about it, made it public in Germany. Okay, there was a big outcry. And the murder stopped, but not before they murdered over 200,000 men in physically ill Germans. The best part of it, the priest was never punished. Okay, so that's why I'm saying it's extremely important not to be afraid, especially what's happening today. Okay, a lot of people are trying, okay, to shut us out. Do not be afraid. Before I finish, later on, we'll have the opportunity, to ask questions, go and go in this. But one of the things I want all of you to remember, during Passover, in the Haggadah, it is a passage that says that in every generation, it tried to unite with us. We prevail. What's happening right now in the Middle East, we will prevail if we will win. But guess what? To the world, I have a very strong message. We are here to stay, whether you like it or not. I will try to tell you.
Andy mentioned the importance of education, and that goes right into our next question, which is to Deborah Piper, who, as I indicated earlier, is with ADL. In order to combat anti-Semitism, education at all levels is essential, including primary, secondary, and post-secondary education. So let's zero in on what needs to be done at the level of K through 12 in terms of curriculum, teacher training. How can we focus on the lower education system?
Full of time, so I was trying to play around with my camera before, my phone. It's a really important question, especially because the school year, unfortunately, is almost upon us. And I would say there's some very clear steps that all of our districts, all of our schools can take. One is setting clear parameters, and this has to do with policy. As Sammy rightly said, there needs to be a clear definition of anti-Semitism embraced within the schools, by the schools, and by the school district to better understand what is often not understood, that it's more than just religious hatred. It can be racialized, like Nazi imagery, white supremacy, and extremist ideologies, which the ADL is actively researching and trying to dismantle. It is the oldest conspiracy. It's about Jewish power, money, control, the class of tropes of anti-Semitism. But it can also be harassment about Zionism, asking us to, Jewish students and teachers and school leaders, to depart from a critical part of many American Jews, how they express their Jewish identity through Israel. So if it's harassment, discrimination, demands that they disavow a connection
can only have an exclusionary impact on students and faculty. And also IRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, we refer to it as a working definition. It provides excellent examples of when legitimate criticism of a democratic or a society, of the government, of a political party, of policies, versus delegitimizing the existence of the state of Israel. Two, as Sammy also stressed, rich education about anti-Semitism, extremism, and Holocaust education for every member of the school community. And I can elaborate if I have more time. I don't like the word enforcement, but why have policies if they're not upheld? Students, teachers, faculty, there should be clear codes of conduct for each of them, so everyone knows what to expect when they're in the school community. This should also extend to social media policies. We know that the better school leaders understand that even if something does not take place in the brick and mortar school, if it takes place online, if it takes place socially, if it takes place as a parent, those chats that I can't stand, but if it trickles back into the school environment, it can negatively impact not only the learning environment, but the social environment as well. And here in New York State, thanks to leaders like Assembly Member, we have the Dignity for All Student Act, which mandates that schools have visible procedures of what to do in the face of discrimination, that they have a coordinator that people can lodge complaints with. Curriculum materials about Israel, which is a particular passion of mine. We need to have professional development. All the organizations represented on this panel have rich professional development opportunities. We need to seek out allies who also appreciate the need for truth, facts, balanced perspectives. It indicates that not only Jewish people think that anti-Semitism is a serious problem, but our allies do as well. And finally, speaking up when there's a hostile environment, as Sammy said, and really supporting teachers. I can elaborate further with time, but those are 6 steps that all of you can help to advocate for to make your children's, grandchildren's, neighbors, children's schools safe for all students.
Yeah, but thank you for the special committee of the time. Go around before. The panel would like to comment on anything that Deborah has said with respect to education. Once, right? Okay, on to the next question. Next question goes to someone I introduced earlier. That is Julia Zappa. And the question is, one of the big items in the news is the Columbia University $200 million settlement with the federal administration, following widely publicized instances of anti-Semitism. What are colleges and universities doing to combat anti-Semitism from the student point of view? What should they be doing? Are they being effective? And in particular, what might work best? Julia?
So Columbia's $200 million settlement is just the start. Universities are facing a reckoning. Here's what's happening and what needs to change. What universities are doing right is some schools are finally meeting anti-Semitism clearly. They're beginning to meet face-to-face with Jewish students like myself, and anti-Semitism is being recognized as part of a broader fight against hate. But here's where they fall short, again and again. There's no bold condemnations when Jewish students are targeted, especially as we've seen after October 7th. They give watered down, both sides statements that minimize real hate on our campuses. They have toothless task forces and committees with no real consequences for offenders. They give form letter responses instead of real support. And Jewish leaders are consulted only after a crisis, never before or even really during. Under the current administration, the federal government is tying billions in funding to strict reforms like crackdowns on protest activity tied to anti-Semitism, federal oversight of academic departments, and mandatory external monitors and ideological audits. In my opinion, starting now, universities must pass a zero tolerance code of conduct that defines anti-Semitism clearly in the policy. They must install an independent oversight office, organize a rapid response team providing 24/7 support for Jewish students facing hate. And this could include a live dashboard that students, faculty could track. They should introduce a mandatory no anti-Semitism pledge that should be signed by students and faculty so they know what they're agreeing to. They need to appoint a Jewish student safety coordinator. They need to instate anti-discrimination training, so students are being educated, learning. And lastly, they must provide heightened security for Jewish spaces. Here's the bottom line. Let there be no doubt. Universities may master the art of statements, but they fail at safety. Words don't stop swastikas or slurs. Only concrete enforcement, real consequences, and Jewish student leadership at the table can secure our protection. Thank you.
The response from Rabbi Hill?
Response for everything that you has said. But just to add to it, there is a standard called Title VI. And Title VI identifies classes of people by race, by religion, and Jews had not been included in Title VI. So what universities have not done was what we should have done, which is that we need to recognize as a people. There are, 30 billion Muslims in the world, and there are only 15 million Jews, but we're not a minority. And I just find it just incomprehensible that Jewish students clearly have been targeted, have been discriminated against, have not been included up until now as an identified class for protections under Title VI, and only because of the pressure from the federal government is something happening now to recognize who we are. Probably another comment or two, a question, but I'm just going to do it for now.
May I make a comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, especially for the young people. Okay. Look, okay, at Julia. She is the best example that I can pick up what I'm looking for, what I hope that everybody would be. Okay, this is an example of an up standard. She made sure that I'm coming to Lehigh, okay, apparently I made an impression, I don't know why, but she made sure that I am here. So take an example from here, learn from her, okay, that's very good. Thank you. Very interesting.
Particularly on the subject of colleges and universities, certainly one of the most difficult challenges on campuses today is defining the line between protected free speech and hate speech, between legitimate political expression and harassment or intimidation. And as everyone here knows, this can play out not only in rallies, but also in the classroom. So, Bella, tell us from your perspective and all the great work that you're doing on college campuses, how should institutions go along? What kind of guidance should be in place that assures simultaneously freedom of expression, but also the protection and dignity of Jewish students?
Thank you, Jay. That's a great question. And I want to be clear that freedom of speech and freedom of expression should be protected on our college campuses. So much as the protesters and the people who we don't like have the right to share misinformation and their legitimate protests, we also have the right to empower our students to share Israel's truth. And so we shouldn't be doing anything that's prohibiting our freedom of speech because we have the right and the need to fight back against that misinformation. However, I went to journalism school, and one of my favorite classes I took was mass comm law, and in that class you learn you can't shout fire in crowded theater. And so when speech has direct threats of violence, specific direct threats of violence against individuals in an institution, that type of speech should not be protected. For example, and these are actual examples of things that we've seen happen on college campus that should not be protected. Calling out specific hill directors and accusing them of genocide. That is not legitimate criticism of any one government policy that they disagree with. That is calling for direct violence against an individual. I've had students who are taken for hostages on campus, and had people go up to them and threaten directly to end their house. Again, that is not legitimate criticism of any policy, that is a specific and direct threat of violence. Also, when these protests happen outside of Hill houses or Quad houses, that is specific and targeted at these institutions simply because they are Jewish. And so having time, place, and manner restrictions on speech is incredibly important. Because that's saying you can only have these protests, it's allowing the protests to happen, but saying they should be in this space of campus, they shouldn't be this loud, and also, again, saying that calls for violence, which also includes things such as globalized intifada, that should not be allowed and protected on our college campuses.
No, is it possible, can you or someone kind of explain what is meant by time, place, and manner? So we all understand what that means?
Yeah, so time, place, and manner restrictions are pretty common across college campuses, and I think a big pitfall that often money campus happens is that universities are not enforcing these restrictions. But time, place, and manner restrictions, you can see them in most university codes of conduct, and it says that you're allowed to gather as a group. However, it has to happen within these times. Students who pay tuition to study on campus go to the library, and so it's restricting the time in which these protests can happen, the place that it can happen. So, for example, when protests happen on a lawn house that is off campus or a hill house on campus, it's saying that these protests should be restricted to perhaps a student block or a specific place on campus. And then the manner in which they occur. So no amplified sound is pretty common. And these are universal rules that apply to all students. I've had students who have not had a voice permit, and so they've also been called out by these time, place, and manner restrictions, even though everything they were saying was perfectly legitimate. And so universities have the responsibility to uphold these restrictions for every student, so that way these protests don't get out of hand.
I have a question for you.
Well, hold on for a moment. Let's just first ask if anyone has a response to anything that Bella has said. Maybe you could put your question in the form of a response. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, my apologies. But, okay, while you are speaking, why is, okay, that to Israel? Okay, that to America? Okay, I'm Hamas. Global intifada. Why is it considered freedom of speech? This is hate speech, incitement.
No, I mean, that is a great question. And I would argue that those types of speech is what I'm talking about, that specific call for violence, especially things such as death to Israel, that's calling for violence directed at a specific institution, like the I am Hamas, and those types of specific phrases, those aren't legitimate criticisms of any one government policy, and so they should not be protected on campus. And when universities have these time, place, and manner restrictions, and also I was going to mention the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is not legally binding, is not meant to show speech. However, it should be used as a guide so that when students say these things, and particularly the manner in which they're saying them, make me held accountable. We're seeing universities start to implement consequences, but there's definitely a lot more.
Thank you both. Now we come to probably one of the hardest questions of the night, because this question puts us into the present day situation that's occurring all across this country and all across this world. So Brandon, you're about to be asked the toughest question that I see before us. There is a growing trend of artificial intelligence generated content on platforms. Rocks, X, deepfakes, social media, there's tremendous, outrageous hate that are being perpetrated every single day through social media. They're being used to spread anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and hate speech. The reason I say this is such a hard question is because it's so pervasive. I mean, if we were to look back just 10 years ago, we wouldn't see anything like exists today. What policies or intervention are needed to combat this pervasive situation, and how can we hold tech companies accountable for the spread of the content?
Thank you for the important question, and thank you, Assembly members, for convening this very important town hall. Indeed, the question you ask is a very, very important question, because what we're seeing is that the largest strand of anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic incidents is online. AJC's own State of Anti-Semitism in America report in 2024 said that almost 70% of American Jews have been the victims of or seen witnesses of anti-Semitic content online. So that goes to the point that you're making of why this topic is so important. So as my colleague said, how do we combat this anti-Semitism that we see online? The first thing to do is to utilize the IRA definition that my colleagues mentioned. We can't combat anti-Semitism unless we can define it and be able to recognize it. We have to train AI models to properly identify anti-Semitism, and we can do this by incorporating anti-Semitic tendencies into their training data to ensure that their learned language models, these LLMs, which are the actions that govern the behavior of AI bots, are not trained to share anti-Semitic content. And we need to utilize resources from different organizations on this panel and other civic organizations that have information about anti-Semitism. We need to recognize different code words that are used. So you might not see the word Jew on AI bots and things like that, but it's utilizing the words globalist or Zionist in place of Jews. So we need to recognize that and be up to date with the latest trends that we're seeing online. And as you said, we need to hold these companies accountable. So we need to make it easier, first of all, to report anti-Semitism and not have convoluted links or forms to do this. We need to name anti-Semitism within the terms of service within these AI companies. So the terms of service should specifically reference anti-Semitism and the IRA working definition. And it should be included as anti-Semitism should be included as a separate category in transparency reports, which brings me to my next point, that there should be routinely published transparency reports on various AI company websites that showcase the volume of anti-Semitic content that we're seeing on these platforms, how it's being taken down, the actions that are taken, and the effectiveness of those actions. And lastly, we need to improve the moderation systems that we see. So preventing AI bias by implementing stronger algorithms that will stop recommending anti-Semitic content. We need to consistently and constantly test the effectiveness of these AI models to make sure that we're addressing deficiencies in recognizing anti-Semitism. And lastly, we need to make sure that the content that is being produced by the AI models is responsible, that it's verifiable information, that it's cited, and that it's coming from websites and credible sources.
So is one of the possibilities to come out of the town hall like this some potential for legislation, rules at some level?
May I?
Yeah, please, yes.
Very comprehensive response. There was legislation passed in New York State last year, Stop Hiding Hate. Very much an initiative of ADL and our partner organizations to hold tech companies accountable, to have their terms of service, as Brandon said, clearly stated, and to report to the Attorney General's office in New York State instances of hate and what they do about it. This is followed by legislation in California. Unfortunately, in both states, it's being challenged in the courts.
Thank you, that was very, very comprehensive because of both responses. Anyone else want to comment on the AI situation and holding the tech companies accountable? Michael?
Thank you, Jay. And first of all, just to quickly start off, when you talk about the pillars of education and legislation, that we need to combat these things. I mean, because, some member of Jay, I don't know how you have a bigger power problem, these kind of things. So really, it's a pleasure to be with you and work with you as always. But I just want to, reflect for a second when we talk about the impact that whether it's AI or social media platforms have on our kids. When we look, at a viral example of that about 18 months ago, about 2 months after October 7th, I remember what happened in Hillcrest High School. Right? Hillcrest High School, had a number of ninth graders, and I say number, I mean mostly all of them, ended up, people called it right, the disturbance, whatever the terminology that you like to use, scared a teacher who was there for 7 years of the school, who all she did was be Jewish and post a picture of herself at the DC rally supporting Israel right before. And they scared her to the point where she had to lock herself in a classroom until the NYPD was able to educate her in this situation. But the important part to learn is when the chancellor ended up sitting down with the kids a couple of days later, he asked them, what led you to this? What led you to think all the things that you shouted? And every single one gave the same answer. Everyone gave the same answer. It was reported in all newspapers with further. So it's not just a question of saying that it can happen. We're seeing in our videos. We're seeing it direct. So part of the answer is also this, is when you have, as my colleague said, abilities to report, one of the things to recognize is, never give up. Because I know that people say, well, I report, it's still there. It's going to be there. But you got to push back. Because if you knock out 50,000 hits and another 100,000 show up, you know what? You keep on going. I'll tell you just one quick example. There was a group called Ocean County down in South Jersey about 3 or 4 years ago. And they built their entire county anti-Semitic platform based on social media and having a Facebook page which came adopted. It was hit once, they changed their name. It was hit twice, they got kicked off entirely, they found another platform, This happens 7 or 8 different iterations. But by the time they had to jump over and over and over again, they went from about 20,000 followers to about 250 followers. Because people just gave up. So the fight is important, keep in the fight is important. That's everybody here, and by you being here today, stop. So thank you.
If I can make one quick comment, TikTok, as Michael pointed out, has been a very large source of anti-Semitism. And AJC, to share a success of that, has advocated and was just passed a new public policy manager that is going to work specifically to combat hate speech. Is a new position that TikTok just opened up. And we're proud that this person's first appearance was at an EJC conference held in France, actually bringing together young professional American Jewish and French Jewish leaders and speaking about their work and this new position to combat hate speech and specifically to combat what has really been a flood of anti-Semitism on TikTok since October 7th.
I think that we have to identify where the battle is being fought. The battle is being fought for the hearts and minds, particularly of our young people, and the platform is social media. I don't know how many of you looking at in this room are subscribers to X, called Twitter. If you can really get physically ill, just following some of the strands of messages that go through with regard not only to Israel, but with regard to Jews. So I commend my colleagues, particularly from the Major Defense Organization, the LAOC, and everyone. If you see something, say something, right? So same thing is true with regards to social media. Whatever you see that you find reprehensible, report it, report it. Don't just get, as I said before, don't just get ill, do something about it. And I think that maybe one of the things that come out of this panel discussion is what specifically one can do. If you see something, many of us are on, older folks are on Facebook. You see something on Facebook, you see something on Instagram, you see something on X or any other one of the platforms. What can you do? Spell it out. Specific step 1, step 2, step 3.
Thank you, very well said. So the questions are going to continue to get hard. We only have 2 questions left, and then we'll turn to Woody's suggestions that we received either online or from the card, but it didn't collect. So they're getting hard. And they return back to Rabbi Noah. What can or should be done when public officials or candidates for public office make statements that are anti-Semitic?
Beautiful question, yes. That is the question. I thought I was getting a softball. Very, very difficult question to answer. And I'm going directly into the subject matter. If a candidate does not believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, that is an anti-Semitic statement. And why do I say that? Why do I say that? Just look at history. It isn't just the delegitimization of Israel. It's the delegitimization of Jews, as if we don't exist. I talked about it with the framework of DEI. He talked about it as well, with the framework of elected officials, public officials, and society as a whole, and social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Jewish people have been on that land for over 3,000 years, 3,500 years. We are to blame that in the year 586 BCE, the Babylonians came and destroyed our temple and took us into exile. We're to be blamed for that. We're to be blamed that in the year 70 CE, that the Romans came and destroyed the second temple and took us into exile into Europe. We're to be blamed. We're to blame that many of us in this room look Caucasian. We have been in Europe for 2,000 years, for God's sake. But we've never lost sight of what our identification is with Sion, with Zion, with Israel, with our homeland. There were kings, there was civilization, there were kings, there were queens, there were high priests, there were priests, there were Levites, there were one time 12 tribes. Sanherib came, how do you say that in English? It's a name. King Sanherib came and he took 10 tribes into exile. That's our fault. That's our fault.
It's the only country that's questioned.
Yes.
The
We're
only.
the only, but it goes beyond that. We're not only the only country that's questioned, we're the only people that's questioned. There are 21 Muslim countries, 21, maybe 22 Muslim countries. They have a right to exist as Muslim countries. Switzerland has a cross on its flag, among other countries. They have a right to put a cross on their flag. But Jews don't have a right to have their own state. A state rarely had civilization with monarchs and temples and who knows what. Yes, I think we need to speak out. We need to challenge. The challenge based on history, my friend. This is not limits. Based on history of who we are as a people and what our rights are with regard to identification with the land of Israel and the current modern state of Israel.
Any other member of the panel would like to respond?
By the way, when I say respond, it's a neutral word, which means say whatever comment.
Bill, I just want to add one additional piece on, sorry, there's another accusation. There's an accusation, I gotta be very specific, there is a political candidate whose father is a professor at Columbia, who believes that Israel is a colonial state. Israel is a colonial state. Look at your dictionary, as well as colonialism. We are not a colonial people. We have a legitimate right to want to return and identify with our homeland, where we live. It's a, in my view, it's an anti-Semitic accusation to call us colonialists.
Thank you, Michael. In following up to the question, I wanted to add that there need to be ramifications for this kind of comments, anti-Semitic statements by public officials, by elected officials. And one thing that we can all do is there are many elected officials who are not anti-Semitic, and they need to be speaking up. We need to advocate to them. They need to speak up, and they need, and the ones that are anti-Semitic need to know that this is not okay, that this is not acceptable, and that the wide swath of pro-Israel elected officials that support our community are condemning this kind of behavior.
Any other comments from the panel?
Yeah, I think what Rabbi Miller really cuts to the heart of is that words matter. Many of our organizations up here are 501c3s, which means we can't participate in criticizing or supporting particular candidates. And it's probably a good idea to have that neutrality, but we can demand that people take care of their words and that words matter. And what's being highlighted here is really a vast of understanding about who Jewish New Yorkers are. And here's where we get back to education. Because really the first step is introducing ourselves. We went this late moment after being here since 1654, about who the Jewish people are, who Jewish Americans are. I'm looking at all these photographs around this room, and I'm pretty sure there's some Jewish New Yorkers from around the time that ADL and other organizations were founded in 1913 to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure just and fair treatment for all. This UJA, but they did a wonderful initiative last May to bring Jewish American Heritage Month resources to schools so accessibly that they had posters representing the diverse Jewish community, both in terms of where we come from in the world, and yes, our economic diversity should also be included in these discussions, and our bodies should be in public schools so that we can participate in these discussions. But they did it so cleverly as a former teacher that they did it so it was sized for photocopy paper that schools would have, that they could easily print out these posters to put all around the room. And of course, this education does not have to be restricted to the month of May. We can push for voices being included in reading lists, summer reading lists, classroom libraries, professional development programs. And I think if we really earnestly can demonstrate that there is a gap in knowledge about the Jewish community, that, for example, my son's name in Hebrew is Ben Sion, and my daughter's middle name in Hebrew is Ami, my people, that we are people, that we have a shared ancestry, then perhaps that we'll be able to, in the future, not have to worry so much about words of particular candidates because they will be good, right words.
Thank you, Deborah. We have with us here Inspector Marcus, who leads the hate crimes task force. And that is extremely important, I think, to all of us and the communities that we all care so deeply about. So again, a very hard question. Given the tragic and horrible attacks in Boulder, Colorado, Washington, D.C., which we're all familiar with, and the terrible rise in anti-Semitic related hate crimes documented by Deborah and ADF. What safety measures should be implemented to protect worshippers of Judaism?
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much. And thank you to the other instructors now. Thank you to the those now. Public safety is a shared responsibility, as our mayor often says, and I often like to say that fighting crime is a team sport. NYPD is a team sport, and when it comes to fighting hate, that could not be true. Everybody has a role to play. The hate crime task force, our role is to evaluate essentially every single crime that happens in the city of New York, determine if there's a motive bias, and ultimately, if there is, find that perpetrator. That is our solemn obligation, is to arrest those responsible for bias motivated crimes. But it's not always so simple, and it's not always so straightforward. There are countless examples that we all recite here today that are clear-cut examples of bias motivated hate. But there are those that are extremely difficult to discern the nuances, but it feels wrong, and we know that something's not right. So our first call to action when it comes to combating hate, whether it's in synagogues, in our institutions, or on our streets, is to simply ask every single person who thinks that they may have been the victim of a crime to report it. The onus is not on the victim to determine if they were the victim of a hate crime. Simply report it. We have some of the most seasoned, talented investigators that work in the hate crime task force. They fight for an opportunity to serve in that role. They don't get any extra. They don't get any extra bonuses or overtime. They take just price to come to work. They do it because they love this job and they understand the impacts that they have with you. So let them do their jobs. That then in turn allows us, the NYPD as a whole, to deploy our resources accordingly. But as I said, it is a team sport. It is not the NYPD's ability to fight, even if we could. Everyone has a role to play. Reporting it is one, education is another, and that is why we have these great partners that are sitting here at the table with us today, and that is why you're here today, because you want to be part in this fight with love. So, thank you.
You want to comment?
Just also when it comes to our campuses, I think as I mentioned earlier, we have the obligation to encourage students to speak up and be proud, but a lot of students are really scared. And so one way that we can help them be less scared is teach them self-defense, teach them to be aware of his surroundings. I graduated college not that long ago, and I'm guilty of it. The first thing I do when I walk into a room is you go on your phone. And we need to teach students basic situational awareness skills that they at least feel confident and comfortable on their campuses, which should be their safe spaces that unfortunately are not anymore, that they're able to identify threats when they happen. And so teaching students self-defense classes, teaching them basic situational awareness will go a long way and will also hopefully help our students feel more confident and equipped to handle situations when institutions are failing them.
The other member would like to comment?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that. I agree. I think safety is a really big threat to students. They're worried that if they speak up, they are going to be threatened or targeted in return. But I also think that it's a broader issue of also students feel that if they talk to someone about what's going on, that nothing's going to be done. I definitely had that in my own institutions where I have moments where I think, is my action or me speaking up going to have a result? And I've come around to recognize that sometimes having the result is not always what the goal should be. I always say, if you speak to a group or a person, and even if they don't walk away 100% agreeing with your point, if you provide them with one even small takeaway that they can go home at the end of the night and say, "Ooh, I learned something. I'm gonna think differently about this topic, name topic X." Then for me, I can put my own head on the pillow at night and feel like I accomplished something. So I think that we need to teach our young that, those kinds of tenets, and that they should operate on that.
I really want to commend Inspector Marcus as the head of the NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force, and most especially to commend Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch for what NYPD is doing in New York to protect us, our Jewish community. Gary is one of us, member of the Jewish community that every head of the task force has been. And it's been really a pleasure working with him over the years since he's been in this position. And I just want to mention to add that we talked about resources, that one of the significant resources that there is in combating anti-Semitism and ensuring the safety of our Jewish institutions is it's an initiative called CSI, the Community Security Initiative. And it was founded at JCRC together with UJA Federation. Cheryl Fishbein was my last year as the CEO in those days. Was my president, Susie Jaffe, has been a leader of JCRC for many, many years. We work very closely together. CSI is really a lifeline for many 2,000 Jewish institutions in the New York metropolitan area. And I believe last year, there might have been someone on your panel from CSI who participated, and they really are a tremendous resource for Jewish community and work in partnership with NYPD. They work in partnership with the ADL and probably work in partnership with the AJC too. I'm not aware. And the most important thing is that we as a Jewish community have the depth of organizational structure to have an institution, Community Security Initiative, to look after, as I said, 2,000 Jewish institutions in the New York metropolitan area.
Just to follow up on that, when it comes to actually auditing location, that's not so that a school or a synagogue or any kind of institution like that, CSI is a phenomenal resource. So we work hand in hand. There's so much over here, very close friend at this point. But the NYPD also has to talk that our crime prevention officer, the crime prevention division. So if that is something you have, you would like them, they do offer free crime prevention surveys of location, whether it's a location like this, a community organization, business, they will come out for free and do that survey for you, to give you ideas about arming, things like that. And if it's a location that has a sensitive nature to it, they will share that information potentially with our counterterrorism people and things like that. So it's a great way to, it's something I really encourage you to take advantage of. And when you do that, it's simply by contacting your local precinct. Walk in, you can call the precinct, you speak to your community affairs officers, your SCOs, whatever contacts you have there, your local precinct. Every precinct has a crime prevention officer who report back to the crime prevention division, and they have a ton of resources specifically for hardening targets. So I just want to make sure that everyone has it.
I'm speaking as a Holocaust survivor. All the tragedies in the world started with words and bullying. And we have to be very precise in the words that we are using. A former Prime Minister of Israel used the word West Bank. Why? Okay, number one, West Bank is a geographical description of an area. It was called by Jordan. But we are, okay, like the French are coming from France, Greeks are coming from Greece, we come from Judea. We should use, okay, Judea in some area. Okay, if you don't like it for political reasons, use disputed territories. Take a look at the difference between West Bank and disputed territory for Judea and Samaria. If you use the word West Bank, then the first thing that comes to mind is occupation, confrontation, nothing can be resolved. If you are using the word Judea and Samaria, it means that we are dangerous to the land. Okay, we cannot occupy our own land. The word occupation does not come in play. At the same time, for example, if you use disputed territories, okay, there's another option. Both sides are willing to work. You can come to a resolution. So we have to be very precise in the words that we are using. And this is with our children, with our neighbors, in everything else. So please be very careful in how you say it. Do not allow anybody, okay, to get away with the wrong, okay, description.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael?
Just very quickly, I hear a lot of people always talk about, the value of these forums. And one of the things that's so valuable is when you hear all the different resources that are available that aren't happening. And one of the things that you want to realize is that, when and I'm privileged to see this constantly, seeing Rebecca see right how hard she's working involved day in, day out. When you talk about all the funding, the hardening of sites, when you talk about the funding, for security, you talk about a lot of the issues that make sure to get to the top of the legislative agenda, whether it's in the city or the state, our elected officials are the most critical elements in making sure that happens. And when we talk about action items, our action should be to support one of many actions should be to support and to be there. Because I'm telling you, when you go to Albany, and you go to City Hall, and go to any of these spaces, the people who are thinking on the other side of these issues, trust me, they are there. So, first of all, I would just say tonight, before you leave, make sure to thank your zoning member for everything that she's doing, so I'm telling you firsthand, see.
Okay, can I just wait for one moment here?
Quickly, please.
That'd be very quick. First of all, New York City is so blessed to have the hate crimes task force under the leadership of Inspector Marcus. They're fantastic partners. In terms of the question that you asked, we can also be empowered. Get to know your precinct, introduce yourself, walk in, they have community affairs officers. My children's school, we had a Shabbat picnic at the end of the year, just the Jewish families, and I called the Central Park precinct to let him know that the chief over there, to let him know that there's gonna be a group of Jews, not necessarily visible, convenient, and we're probably gonna be leaving when it's dark, when we said Kiddush. And we have to help the law enforcement be able to help keep us safe. When I'd be totally remiss, of course, law enforcement should be your first call. But please, don't, as Inspector Marcus said, it's not incumbent on you. If you feel that you've seen anti-Semitism, please report it to the ADL. It's not had an opportunity to talk about the audit that ADL has kept since 1979. As opposed to the crime statistics, which are also very important. The audit includes incidents to really give a landscape of how anti-Semitism is playing out in our state and in our city. In 2024, 68% of the anti-Semitic incidents in New York State happened in New York City. And ADL has one satellite office of the 23 regional offices, and it's in Brooklyn. Because after 2022 audit, when we saw an increase in incidents, particularly against the visibly Jewish Orthodox community, we said we have to be there, we have to be on the ground. So please, if you just look up ADL report incident, if it doesn't happen on a campus or in the Orthodox Haredi community or in a Jewish institution, if it happens in New York State, it comes to me. We triage, we try to reach out. We have partners in law enforcement. If you feel that you need a little more support in that department, we have wonderful partners like Assembly Member Seabright. We have, so please report. I don't believe the number for necessarily is accurate because of underreporting, but once you, if there is any doubt, please reach out to us. And also I wanted to point out the silver lining is also an incredible collaboration that we're now seeing in the Jewish community that I don't think I remember existing before. Really, everybody has their space and we do work together.
Thank you, Deborah. I think we all around the force to inspect the office because if you're trying to see if you know, and the things that you want, you have to really, you have to. Try to get into the community that, we have not covered at all so far, which is what interfaith activities should be encouraged in order to broaden the coalition beyond the Jewish community against not only anti-Semitism, but discrimination in general. So can anyone take that question? Because that's so important. Let's start with you and then Mike.
Has been with us for a few years now. We've had a dedicated Christian outreach department. And so just as we train Jewish and Zionist students on our college campuses, our Christian outreach colleagues also train Christian students to identify instances of anti-Semitism and stand up for their Jewish peers. But also going beyond that, we've seen a lot of successful collaboration with the Hindu community as well. For those of you who don't know, just as we have Hill on campus, they have something called Hindu Yuva. We've seen particularly strong collaborations in Los Angeles, but also starting up here in New York between the Hindu communities on campus and the Jewish students. And so those collaborations, I think, really should start with the students when they're in college, and we're seeing it happening. And I look forward to seeing those collaborations continue. And honestly, it really just starts with hello. And the most important part of allyship is not that it should be transactional. And so just really encouraging everyone to just reach out and get to know your neighbors and know the next steps to do.
Thank you. I think it's the biggest core issue that we have to deal with. When I started in my career, I started as an 20 years ago, and I didn't want to go to the easy spaces. So, like any good Jewish boy did, I went to work for a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and then spent another decade working for a member of the Conference of Black Senators. So, it was, and I had the privilege of working side by side with John Lewis and putting together one of the first Black Jewish Relations conferences on Capitol Hill in the late 90s alongside him. I mean, it's really funny because when he agreed, my first comment was, my first thought was, what did I get myself committed to? Let me call Michael Miller, who was my mentors. So that's how far we'll go back. But the thing is, though, we've got to put ourselves in those spaces. What I hear so often is you're asking us all the time, about Holocaust education, but when are you learning about us also? And we have to understand and listen. And to me, I'll tell you, I'm so privileged to work at the Auschwitz Jewish Center Foundation, under the leadership of Simon Burks this year today. Because that's a key in outreach to other communities is a key that we espouse as a core mission. But it's not just a question of saying something. Last week, one of the members of the Black Reconciliation Caucus in the Assembly, had questions about seeing what was going on in Israel. We went out to dinner. We sat down at 6 o'clock in Harlem. We closed the place down at 10 o'clock. Obviously my wife wasn't thrilled with me, but the reality is it's those conversations that make a difference, one by one by one by one. It's a question of recognizing, what we need to do. I remember so many instances, when I was elected official in New Jersey, people coming to me in my constituency, and which was largely Jewish, and say to me, why do we have problems with the other side of the councils? My quick answer was, have you reached out to anybody? Have you spoken to anybody? So the question is we need the programs. But we also need to recognize that we've talked about these, whether it's the historic Black Jewish relationship, we talk about our other relationships. That was a core part of who we were for decades and decades. We've kind of lost our way in that a little bit. And we need to go back into our next generation. We have to make sure that we're espousing those kinds of understandings. We have to make sure that if you have more people that will go and say after college, I'm gonna work for an opposite community and learn and be involved and teach and make sure that we show that we're going to be real partners, because we can't expect other communities to be there for us if that's the only thing we expect. And it's hard work. It's time, it takes a lot of time. But you know, everybody here on this panel, we do that time, and we can use your help. Because it's meeting neighbor to neighbor, we can't all do it alone. So really, everybody here, there is something to do. I've dedicated my entire career to those relationships and whoever asked that question, really, thank you for posing.
Michael and Ned said. Michael and Ned said.
Talking about interfaith. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, talking about interfaith. There was an attempt, okay, to talk in Muslim schools. Okay, I was invited, it was a completely Muslim school. Okay, most of the kids were from Turkey. I was very well received, but there was one major issue. Okay, did not go any further. So when we start the program, we should have to make sure that whatever we do, whatever we can do in the program, okay, there are many good programs that people are starting, and it should also come to a solution and to go further. And I'm interested in interfaith.
Michael?
I'm interested in debate fellow too, dedicated tremendous amount of my career towards that objective. I was very fortunate. I agree with everything that has been said, particularly young colleague, my phone. Yeah, interfaith thought. We haven't spoken about that. So let me just speak about it for a moment. Just think about it. The term of art nowadays is called an influencer, or your influencers. The influencers in the non-Jewish world are their pastors, their priests, or their ministers, or their imams. And JCR's, the Jewish Relations Council, has really focused on that, as have other organizations. The New York Board of Rabbis, your friend and colleague, Joe Potasnik, has led some efforts in that regard. And I sit with Robert Potasnik on the Commission of Religious Leaders, led by Cardinal Dolan. Cardinal Dolan is the Catholic Church in Staten Island, Manhattan, and the Bronx. In Queens, in Brooklyn is the Brooklyn Diocese, and the Bishop of Brooklyn Diocese is part of the Commission of Religious Leaders. And we meet like every 6 weeks and walk through a variety of issues. But I identify myself, or have identified myself, as a community relations professional. Community relations is about building relationships. So it isn't just relationships with elected officials. And I commend Mike's work in that regard. There's Tina, who was here today, and others who have worked very, very diligently in building relationships between our Jewish community and non-Jewish elected officials, particularly people of color, who know us less than others may do. But on the religious spectrum, it's vital that we reach out to the Catholic community, the Protestant community, Muslim community, the Buddhist community, the Hindu community, et cetera, et cetera. I'm an Orthodox rabbi, and I have spoken in more churches than I have fingers and toes. It's important to hear the voice of the Jewish community as well. So I underscore that in terms of combating anti-Semitism. As Sammy has said time and again, it's all about education. We need to educate our colleagues as to who we are as a people.
I'll give you the mic in a moment. I just want to make a comment. I serve as vice president. I say vice president of Queens College, senior advisor to the president. And if you come and visit the student union building at Queens College, as many of the members of the panel know, you will see the Hillel on the same floor as the Catholic Newman Center, on the same floor as the Greek Orthodox Club, on the same floor as the Muslim Student Association. You will see they're all on the same floor. And we have a council that meets, once a semester. And they share information. They don't always come to agree. But because they're in touch with each other, it makes a big, big difference. And I think that that's part of what colleges and universities need to do a lot more. You want to make a comment?
So when it comes to interfaith meetings and things like that, I would be remiss if I didn't just make one quick note. This is something we're able to participate in. It's no secret, Mayor Adams has been a tremendous ally and taken very bold stand when it comes to anti-Semitism. But equally important to what you see, maybe more so, is what you don't see. And he has led through his community affairs office a program called Breaking Bread and Building Bonds, which brings together people of different faiths, different ethnicities, to share a meal and get to know each other. And my office has had the privilege of participating in some of those, as well as helping do some statistical overlays to see the efficacy of that program, overlaying with current econ trends, seeing if it's actually working. And I can tell you, it absolutely is. So to date, he's done over 10,000 meals across the city. And if that's something that you would like to participate in, there are, I think, several thousand more slated for 2025. You can simply look up City Hall Community Affairs Unit, and they will have tons of information on that. But that program is Breaking Bad, Building Bonds. If you want to do something in that interfaith space, now.
This is a question from the audience, and it's directed at AJC, Stand With Us, and ADL. And I would just make it a little more broadly, which is the question is really about whether or not your organizations are meeting with the mayoral candidates to figure out at least one that was mentioned. But are you meeting with the mayoral candidates on what they are doing to combat anti-Semitism? A fair question, since the election is coming up in the fall. Who would like to take that one?
You can say, I will say, and my colleagues will share the same sentiments, I'm sure. EJC is a 501c3 organization, so we do not support or oppose elected officials for public office. That being said, of course, issues regarding anti-Semitism are very, very important to EJC, and we are meeting with a variety of elected officials, community partners, interfaith, intergroup partners, and citywide advocates in discussing the issues that are near and dear to agency, issues of combating anti-Semitism and supporting Israel. And so we will continue to monitor those, the statements made by mayoral officials or those running for elected office for the mayor. And, it's something that's very, very important, but AJC will make statements regarding policies and not particular individuals. So that is our stance. And again, we're working to safeguard the well-being of the Jewish community. So these are things that we take very seriously.
Please.
Exactly. And I can just say that in the past, my pursuit is simply in our college department. If an elected official has made clear their priority is addressing anti-Semitism on college campuses, we work to organize students together to sit down and have conversations with a variety of elected officials on their pressing issues and that occurs.
Yeah.
I think, for instance, I often joke with some of your colleagues, AJC, ADL, like scramble. Can I say samesies? In terms of, as I said before, certainly, pressing the message that words matter and clarity of meaning is important. We absolutely meet with elected officials. We often do briefings on our signature product of the audit of anti-Semitic incidents. We have a very active lobbying and legislative policies that we hope to see supported. We absolutely would take meetings about that, but again, it is not the role at this stage in the election process. Certainly, I know that our organization we put out information about voter registration, which I believe ends on October 25th. Someone correct me, to be able to participate in the mayoral election. So we support civic initiatives in that way.
That last point that Deborah made, you can still register to vote in the general election in November, October 25th. So there's a lot of time between now and then, and Keep in mind that less than 30% of those who are eligible to vote actually voted in the recent Democratic primary. Extremely low turnout, even with new voters coming to the polls. So the nonpartisan thing that can be said as clearly as valid is that there is a message that needs to go out to the community, and that is to come out and vote, and not up. If you haven't registered to vote, now is the time to do that. It's very, very important.
And a big part of combating anti-Semitism is strengthening our democratic institutions. So it is completely aligned with our missions to support a robust voter turnout and educated electorate.
Thank you. So we're almost at the 2-hour mark. We're now going to hear from Michael Cohen, who is in a wonderful position to give us our closing remarks. But before we do that, can we really give the very best applause we can muster for this high level, high standard presentation by these panelists? Let's hear it.
So one of the things that I keep on hearing from communities all over, and I know we've heard it tonight for this, but Michael Miller mentioned it, I saw that time. What can we do? Are we being effective? Is all this work that we're doing, are all these panels that we're sitting, are they moving the needle? You know, and it's something which I want to assure you, they are. And not all the time do we recognize or we see anti-Semitic rallies, when we see people on college campuses, we see what's going on, we understand what could be. But I'll tell you, when you think about it, you know, and as we're talking here tonight, I'm thinking all the accomplishments of all of these organizations combined, all of us, you know, we talk all the time, we communicate all the time. But as we collaborate, we all have our strength. And it takes to be able to push and push to the point where things are done. And I'll give you an example, and I'll mention Mark St. Cooney because I know I have Jay here, so I hear this about it. But I saw the CUNY's Chancellor's Jewish Advisory Board. And people ask when I see the street, they say, CUNY's just anti-Semitic. CUNY's horrible, the worst of the worst. I'll tell you, I don't know any other chancellor sitting every 6 weeks with the leadership of the Jewish community. I don't know any other two. I don't know any, you know, and each time, do we get what we want each time? No, we pushed the higher definition a million times there. But you know what? Before we started pushing, there was understanding at that point. We're going to be city things. But when we talk about city college and what happened over there, suddenly we were meeting also with the Board of Trustees. And they were telling us that the Board of Trustees meeting, they recognized the two problems they had with the network security. So they went far away and hired a firm to make sure they could expand the security tenfold on a moment's notice of incident occurs. So if you think about that, and we had those incidents this year since the campus. So you think that, okay, maybe sometimes the things we're looking for, you know, are the things that are not happening because of the work that's going on. And it's hard to say, look, we were accomplished because you see nothing. But the fact that when you see nothing in certain circumstances is because of the immense work behind the scenes. But the reality is, nobody here, no organization every year will tell you, none of us can do a single thing without all of you. None of us can do the work that we do without your support. And when we talk about, as earlier, you know, people look at our elected officials. And I'm always having been in government for so many years, you know, I'm such a big proponent of thanking our elected officials for their service because I see what it takes. And the reality is, are there anti-Semitic elected officials? Absolutely. But you know what? But supporting and making sure that we have people like Marcus right in our midst, in those circles, in those spaces, matters. And making sure that we have conversations with others matters. Making sure that we're going in, whether to every one of these spaces, whether it's educational, whether it's public housing, whether it's wherever it might be, it matters. Because if you serve one person, you serve one kid, you're moving the needle.
So I wanna, I know it's hard oftentimes, to leave everybody, with hope in this current climate, which is one of the most challenging we've ever seen. And it's amazing, representing the Auschwitz Jewish communities, Auschwitz Jewish Foundation, and you look at a positive, right? Positive is we're all still here. We're all still teaching. We're all still moving the needle. So I encourage you, each of you might have a particular interest. Every one of our websites and all of our organizations, most all we do. Every one of you will look at inside yourself and say, this speaks to me, whatever it is for any of us. And answer the bell, call, email, whatever it is to do and say, let me help in this space if I think I have something to do. Because you know what? Our opposition is doing tenfold. Every time you see these rallies, these protests, anything from the other sides, we don't see excuses. We see action. So let's match them, volunteer, let's match the dollar for dollar, let's match them, advocacy, elected official. It's the only way we're gonna be successful. It's a pleasure and privilege to be with everybody here today, and it's a privilege to be with Jay and with, my dear friend, son, Rebecca Stewart, and again, hope, seeing how much I admire her right now, it must be, without paying attention, but, it's, you have somebody here on every side who's really special. And somebody who's fighting for all of us, alongside all of us, and we need him to fight. So let's do this together, let's fight together, let's overcome these challenges together, and let's defeat anti-Semitism as much as we can together. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Michael. We work closely together in Albany. Michael is knocking on my door and we're fighting for funding, and I just do whatever he tells me and sign these letters for more money. So I want to thank our distinguished panel this evening, and also a special thank you to Inspector Marcus. When my office was attacked several years ago, both my campaign office and my government office, we worked very closely with Inspector Marcus, and I can't thank you enough as we work to apprehend this very, very discriminatory person and to protect my staff and my constituents. So thank you again, Inspector Marcus. And again, to all the students, our moderator, Jay Hershenson. A very special intern of Simon Leaking from the my staff and also the staff of the Lenox Hill Neighborhood House. And I see Patty Pinner has arrived to the back of the room. Patty, thank you for your support for the team. By speaking out and standing shoulder to shoulder against hate in all its forms, we will continue this fight, and I'm now prepared to go back to Albany and sponsor some more legislation. I want to invite all of you to come to Albany and advocate when we go back into session in January. Our community office is a storefront office next to the post office on 78th Street and York Avenue. I invite all of you to stop in and share your ideas and thoughts on legislation that you would like to see passed. Again, thank you for coming this evening.